Hey, welcome to the August monthly market report. I'm David Childers, Keeping Current Matters, and excited to talk about what's happening in this market. We're going to cover a couple of things. One, first of all, sort of a tale of two markets, many areas in the country operating in different ways. I'm going to break that down for you. And then we're going to talk about mortgage rates, probably one of the hottest topics right now in our business, talk about where we're at and really what's ahead for the mortgage rate environment. So with that as sort of a backdrop, let's hop right in. All right, let's talk about this, a tale of two markets. The reality is a couple of years ago in real estate, everything was sort of up and to the right. Things were selling very, very quickly. Price was rising very, very quickly. And today it's different depending on where you live. Many cities operating in a different sort of way relative to real estate across the country. Let's start right here. Lance Lambert said this: since the national pandemic housing boom fizzled out in 2022, the national power dynamic has slowly been shifting from sellers to buyers. Of course, across the country, that shift has varied significantly. Maybe you saw, we've talked about it, the Redfin study that came out where they said there was an imbalance, more sellers, more sellers in the market than buyers. But the reality is that's true, but it's not true in every region of this country. This is a look from Redfin. See Northeast, Midwest, Southwest, and sort of the balance of power, if you will. The blue bar represents buyers, the green bar sellers. And so if you start out to the left, the Northeast, more buyers than sellers. If you go into the Midwest, sort of neck and neck, maybe a few more buyers than sellers, but really in the South and the West, it's outnumbered by sellers versus buyers. And that's what kind of creates that dynamic, even though, if you talk to somebody in the Northeast, or maybe you're there now, you'd say things are selling very quickly. There's not enough inventory in the market, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But these dynamics are shifting. Different areas of the country are operating in different ways. We're seeing, major metropolitan areas start to come down year over year in price, and a very, very different market than what we've seen in the prior years. Realtor.com also said the South and West continue to see the greatest inventory gains and the sharpest market slowdowns, with longer time on market and more frequent price cuts. We've talked about how price cuts have grown significantly. They go on to say the Northeast and Midwest remain relatively tighter by comparison, but are also gradually moving towards a more buyer-friendly condition than in recent years. All of this is about inventory, and inventory growing. And I would say there are three things that are sort of happening in the market right now. Inventory is growing. Two, it's having an effect on price. We're seeing that bear out in the market, but again, not the same in every market. If you look at the Midwest and the Northeast, the way you look at this graphic is the blue bar is how much inventory has grown year over year. The red or green bars is how is that compared to pre-pandemic. So just like we talked about, Midwest and Northeast still down from pre-pandemic levels, the last normal years in real estate, if you will, while the South and the West are up over pandemic levels, creating this seller and buyer imbalance. So it's important to know this for a couple of reasons. Let me just stop right here, because you may be saying, well, David, I know all of this, and I'm in one particular the country or another, and this is what's happening, and you're right. Why do I care about what's happening maybe in another area of the country? Well, if you're dealing with somebody that maybe is moving in from another area of the country, it's I think probably one of the best times in our business to help create expectations. So, if I'm in the South and I'm moving to the Northeast, very different dynamics there, but also people turn on the news and they understand what's going on in real estate, and gives you the chance to say, hey, here's what's happening. Still down from pre-pandemic levels, the last normal years in real estate, if you will, while the South and the West are up over pandemic levels, creating this seller and buyer imbalance. So it's important to know this for a couple of reasons. Let me just stop right here, because you may be saying, well, David, I know all of this, and I'm in one particular the country or another, and this is what's happening, and you're right. Why do I care about what's happening maybe in another area of the country? Well, if you're dealing with somebody that maybe is moving in from another area of the country, it's I think probably one of the best times in our business to help create expectations. So, if I'm in the South and I'm moving to the Northeast, very different dynamics there, but also people turn on the news and they understand what's going on in real estate and gives you the chance to say, hey, here's what's happening right now in our local market. Maybe you've heard about a seller and buyer imbalance, but where we're at, there are more buyers right now than sellers, or vice versa, or whatever that is, so that you can be the expert in what you're discussing with them and their plans. But the reality is all of this is sort of being predicated on inventory. And one of the things you want to look at is, what is the inventory change compared to pre-pandemic levels? This comes from Realtor.com, and nationally we're still below inventory levels as compared to 2017, 2018, 2019 by about 13%. But you see across the country here, different states, Texas up 32%, Florida up 29%. You see all the states there in sort of the black font that are down still. And so having a handle on this, understanding it, I think is critically important in our business right now. And sometimes some of these issues are just things that are relatively, I'm going to say, simple to understand. And maybe sometimes we think, well, I need to be talking about something more complex. No, I'd be talking about, hey, if you live in the state of Virginia, we're down 30. I live in the state of Virginia. We're down 36% from pre-pandemic levels. Okay, what does that mean? That means that it's keeping upward pressure on price. Well, if you live in the state of Florida, we're up over almost 30% from pre-pandemic levels. And what do we know about that? Is starting to have an effect on price. Two very different markets, right? Having very different effects. Matter of fact, Realtor.com went on to say at the metro level, 13 of the top 50 metros now exceed their pre-pandemic inventory by 25% or more, all in the South or West regions. On the flip side, 17 of the top 50 metros still lagging at least 25% below their pre-pandemic norms. I was, as I'm recording this here in early August, I read an article this morning that 12 states now are above their pre-pandemic level. So it's slowly happening, coming into the market. We know that's certainly happening, and no two markets are the same. This from Zillow right here, local markets where buyers and sellers have the most power. On the left here, sellers have the most power in Rochester, and you see all of these New York areas right there, Ohio, Michigan. If you go to where buyers have the most power, Florida showing up several times, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, southern sort of contingent right now where buyers have more power. And even going out to the West, we know that buyers have more power as well. But definitely different ways that these markets are operating, being sort of on top of it is important, because the question that always comes up is, well, is what's happening down the South coming for the Northeast, or what is happening over here? Is that a sort of a predicator of what is going to happen in the national real estate market? And the reality is, the average home in this country went up 55%. Think about that, in the last 5 years. And now some of the hottest markets have started to come down in price slightly, I would say, not in a dramatic way. And, the top 50 metros here, according to Resi Club, are sort of split right now. Half of them up year over year, the other half down year over year. Now, I would caution any sort of jumping to any conclusions or panic on this, because the majority of these markets are down 3 to 4%. I mentioned homes went up dramatically in the last 5 years, 55% the national average. So they come down 3 or 4% here in a year. That is certainly not a crash by any stretch of the imagination. And I think right now, being the educator on that, if your market's showing up here to say, hey, here's what's happening in the world. A lot of these markets that are sort of coming down experienced greater appreciation than what the national average was over the last 5 years, and sort of coming off of that. I don't see this as a scenario where we have widespread value loss. Forecasts are still around the 2% range for national real estate this year. Nobody forecasting. Well, there are a couple that are saying, hey, we could go down 1% or so. I think it would be flat price, growth over year, anemic price growth. Some would say, that it's in the market right now. All of that due to the imbalance of sellers and buyers. There being more sellers in these markets than buyers, and a lot of that's almost all of it is due to the affordability question. A lot of it is due to that, and folks, the rise in home prices, the rise in mortgage rates, struggling to be able to go out and buy. A lot of them want to buy, they just can't right now. Yeah, that sort of leads us to the other big topic of mortgage rates. The reality is rates have been stable, probably higher than what we want to see, and that should benefit buyers and sellers with more predictability. The reality is, I'm going to break that down here for you and where we've been, exactly where we're going according to forecasters. But I think mortgage rates weigh heavy on the minds of a lot of potential buyers, where they say, you know what, I want to be able to buy a home and want to be able to afford that, but we just can't right now. And how do we navigate the market given that? That's where we step in, right? To help somebody who thinks, how do I say this is how you can buy a home right now? Sam Cater, Freddie Mac, said mortgage rates have moved within a narrow range for the past few months, really since the beginning of the year. Rate stability, improving inventory, and slower house price growth are an encouraging combination. Now, sort of a little bit higher than what we would want maybe, but they've been moving in this narrow band from 6.5% to 7% on the average 30-year fix. You see it right there in sort of the dotted lines that form, giving the upper and lower limits of that range. But the truth is, rates have been less volatile. Now, the hope is that we can get into an environment where rates start to come down. And I think that could be the case over the next 12 to 18 months. I don't see anybody calling for dramatic fall in rates, but maybe a slight sort of tick down. The old saying that when rates rise, they take the escalator. When they come down, they take the steps, I think is true. Housing Wire said this: analysts, economists, mortgage professionals are coining this quarter's activity as the most calm period for mortgage rates in recent history. What markets like is stability. I think what we like is consumers and folks in the business, we like stability. Calm is good. We want to start to see that calm translate into a little bit lower rate environment. Freddie Mac again: borrowers should find comfort in the stability of mortgage rates, which have only fluctuated within a narrow 15 basis point range since mid-April. Although recent data shows that home sales remain low, the resulting available inventory provides home buyers with a wider range of options to consider when entering the market. And I think that is a good thing for folks. The stability of mortgage rates. I mean, you would say, well, what's going to happen in the future? We want to maybe wait if they're going to come down. Well, the question I always have there is, what do you think everybody else is going to do? What do you think everybody else will do as mortgage rates start to trickle down? We'll see more people come into the market. But the truth is, even in this stability, buyer demand is up slightly in the market. This is from MBA and in the mortgage market purchase application index. The green bar represents this year. The gray bar there represents last year. And you see sort of this departure in February where, sort of the demand application index is higher than what it was year over year. That's a good thing. Certainly want to see more people applying for a mortgage, more people going out and potentially buying a home. And that's something that we want to continue to watch here. Daniel Hale said, I expect generally a downward trend for rates this year. That's important to recognize, but at a slow enough pace that it might not be noticeable in any given month. I think the sort of path of rates right now is going to depend on incoming data. Most forecasters are saying, hey, they'll come down slightly. If I open this up, you can see it right here. What are the projections for the coming year? It's relatively flat. I don't see anybody calling for this, dramatic change in mortgage rates, maybe between 6 and 6.5, where we've been bouncing around between 6.5 and 7. The reality is, too, we could get down into the fives. I think that's certainly a possibility in the coming year that we could dip our toe in the fives. But I don't see anybody right now saying, "Hey, we're going to make a dramatic sort of a departure from where we've been," and that's important right now, right? I want to continue to update people on what's happening. There are savings that will happen as we drop from 6.5 maybe to 6. And that's important for the affordability question that many have. And Lawrence June said this: even incremental small changes in mortgage rates will bring more buyers in. It'll bring people from the sidelines into the market so that they can participate. You know, the thing that weighs heaviest on this real estate market is affordability. And I try to remind, I've had a chance to speak to some agents here over the last several weeks, and I try to remind folks of a couple of things. One, we're undersupplied in homes in this country by about 2 to 3 million units. That's always going to keep upward pressure on prices. And obviously in some of these hot markets, we talked about Florida markets, seeing prices come down. The other thing that we know in that, as we go through this, as rates improve, that'll bring more people into the market. So still undersupplied, that keeps upward pressure on prices. There are more people that want to buy right now. They just can't. They'll be able to as rates come down. You know, I've broken down the affordability equation many times here on the monthly market reports: the price of the home, the mortgage rate, and the wage that is being earned. We know people are earning more money. We know that mortgage rates, according to forecasters, will come down slowly, and we know prices are not rising as rapidly. So that bodes well for affordability, right? It's not today where you don't go, okay, we're going to snap our fingers and we're, in a different situation, but it bodes well for the future and affordability. Move on here to Zillow. Slightly lower mortgage rates towards the end of the year could further improve affordability, but significant improvements appear likely. You know, this is the point where we say there isn't good news, there isn't bad news. It's just the news in the housing market. So, maybe some people are blindly positive, going, hey, everything's going to change and we're going to be in a different scenario. I do not see people saying that. I want to remind you of that this is the market, the professionals market, that people get out there, they educate their clients, they talk to them about what's happening, and they show them the facts. And that's the reality. People will transact in this market, life change, all the things that we know will cause them to buy. We need to be there to be able to educate somebody. It's interesting. I was at an event last week talking to an agent. She said, when I go sit down with on a listing appointment with a potential seller, I asked them, has someone taken the time to educate you on this market? And she said, 9 times out of 10, they say no. And my encouragement would be, you have a few more slides here that we're going to cover, but take these slides from the monthly market report, use them in your listing presentation, use them in your buyer consultation, so that you can educate people on the market, so that you can show them this is what's happening. Because if you can educate someone, you don't have to convince them to do anything. They can then make the best decision for them and their family. And even an education point like this, or understanding something like this right here. If you take a $400,000 loan amount, which is pretty close to sort of the national average, you may say, well, David, you can't buy anything in my market for that. Well, there are a lot of markets you can, but you could take this and double it, if you will, for an $800,000 loan amount. But even a 0.25% drop in rate, you see it right here, is $66 in savings. If that were doubled, it's 120 or so, 130 or so dollars in monthly payment savings. And you see even a 0.5 point drops, $132 in savings. So these drops will help people. They will be a good thing for folks that are thinking about buying, right? I want to save money wherever I can. And we want to stay on top of that so that we can educate those that we're working with. Bankrate said this: trying to time mortgage rates is really difficult. That's right. I had a friend of mine that said it used to say, it's like trying to step on a cockroach in her kitchen at midnight. It's not going to happen. Trying to time rates is really difficult. There's no guarantee rates are going to come down to be any more favorable in 3 or 6 months. And that is certainly true. Odetta Cushy said this: for potential home buyers, it's important to get quotes from multiple lenders for a mortgage, as rates can vary dramatically. The bottom line is, I think for anybody in the market right now, certainly those that are out there talking to people about rates. I know we have loan officers, that watch this as well, watch the monthly market report. Being the expert is what wins in today's market. Showing up, educating, saying this is what what we need to do based on your situation is absolutely what wins. If you're an agent that doesn't have a great lender partner, my encouragement to you is to find that great partner so you can lock arms in this market and help give the best advice to the clients you serve so that they can make a powerful and confident decision relative to buying or selling their home or whatever they're going to be doing. The monthly market report is always so much fun to do, talk about what's happening in this market. If you're new in real estate and you're watching this, my encouragement is to keep watching it. You will be educated in what's happening right now. And, we do all of this because we have this core belief that most agents know what's happening out there in the world and in real estate. Good ones really understand it, but only great agents can explain what's happening in the market. And my hope, certainly our team at Keeping Current Matters, is that you can explain what's happening in this market. Well, that was the August monthly market report. Excited to be with you for another month and talk about what's happening in this market. So here's what I'm going to say. Don't let this information die with you today. Take it, use it on a presentation or have it on your phone so that you're equipped to have the conversation with somebody and be the educator.